But Baalbek, if there was one example, one ancient site on Earth that is evidence of a lost, ancient, advanced civilization, Baalbek has the largest stones that were ever quarried in human history, the largest stones that were lifted, stacked, and transported in human history, and the largest stone columns in all of classical history.
What if I told you there's a place where stones weighing more than 10 blue whales were lifted into the air with surgical precision, thousands of years before we invented cranes? A place so impossible, so perfectly engineered, that even our most advanced modern technology can barely comprehend how it was built?
So this really does look like it's one of the largest stones here at Baalbek. Probably the size of one of the 400-ton stones.
Welcome to Baalbek, Lebanon. The site that has silenced every engineer, archaeologist, and historian who has tried to explain it. But here's what will really make your mind spin. After decades of investigation, we've finally uncovered who built this. And the answer will completely shatter everything you thought you knew about ancient civilizations. Before we reveal the truth behind this impossible structure, ask yourself this. What if our ancestors knew something we've completely forgotten? The impossible engineering. Let me paint you a picture of just how absurd this situation really is. Right now, the largest stone ever moved by modern machinery weighs 340 tons. That's using 21st century technology, GPS systems, computer modeling, hydraulic cranes, and teams of specialized engineers. Now, at Baalbek, there are stones weighing 1,500 tons. Let that sink in for a moment. 1,500 tons. That's over 4 times heavier than anything we can move today. And these aren't just lying on the ground. They're suspended 23 feet in the air, fitted together with such precision that you couldn't slip a piece of paper between them. Baalbek holds the world record for the largest stones ever quarried in human history. The largest stones ever lifted in human history. The largest stones ever transported and stacked in human history. And the largest stone columns in all of classical history. NASA's Vehicle Assembly Building, home to one of the world's most powerful cranes, couldn't even lift these blocks off the ground. Think about it this way. Imagine trying to move the Statue of Liberty. Now imagine moving 5 of them stacked on top of each other, with millimeter precision, without any modern equipment whatsoever. Impossible, right? But here's where this mystery gets really strange. The deafening Roman silence. The Romans were obsessed with documentation, absolutely obsessed. They wrote detailed accounts of building aqueducts. They documented the construction of the Colosseum down to the smallest detail.
The solution lay in 3 key architectural innovations that form the secret of Rome's great monuments.
They bragged endlessly about their architectural achievements, and rightfully so. They were incredible engineers. Yet when it comes to Baalbek, known to them as Heliopolis, their records are completely, utterly silent about these massive foundation stones. Not a single mention. Not one word about the trilithon.
Trilithon stones. 3 stones, 900 tons apiece, or 800 metric tons, and they were moved a half a mile from the quarry. They were lifted and stacked approximately 30 feet off the ground.
Nothing about these colossal blocks that dwarf everything else they ever built. Does that make any sense to you? This is the same civilization that left us thousands of pages documenting their engineering triumphs. But about the most impressive stones in their entire empire, stones located over 2,000 miles from Rome, they wrote absolutely nothing. And here's another bizarre detail. When you examine these stones closely, you don't see the Roman foot measurements. The Romans had a standardized measurement system they used for all their constructions. You'd expect to see some breakdown of the Roman foot in these measurements. But they're not there at Baalbek. So the question becomes unavoidable. Were these stones already there when the Romans arrived? Did they simply build their temples on top of an existing foundation that was far, far older than anyone realizes? It's like discovering someone built a modern skyscraper on top of mysterious ancient foundations, but never bothered to mention who created those foundations or how they got there in the first place. This silence has opened the door to some of the wildest theories in all of archaeology. And as you'll see, some of those theories might not be as crazy as they first appear. The megaliths themselves. Let's talk about what we're actually dealing with here. The trilithon, 3 massive limestone blocks, form the western wall of Baalbek's foundation. Each stone stretches 62 feet long, 14 feet high, and 12 feet wide, and each one weighs approximately 800 tons. But here's what makes engineers lose sleep. These giant stones aren't sitting on the ground. They're suspended 23 feet in the air, fitted together perfectly with no mortar, no space for even a speck of dust. How do you even begin to move something that weighs as much as several jumbo jets, let alone lift it up and place it with surgical precision? And remember, this was accomplished thousands of years before we had cranes, hydraulic lifts, or modern machinery. But wait, it gets even more impossible. About half a mile from the main temple, there's a quarry that holds even bigger secrets. Sitting there, abandoned for centuries, are 3 unfinished stone blocks that make the trilithon look small by comparison. The first is called the Stone of the Pregnant Woman. It weighs nearly 1,000 tons. Then there's the Stone of the South, discovered in the 1990s, weighing a staggering 1,100 tons. And if that doesn't blow your mind, archaeologists found an even bigger one in 2014, the Forgotten Stone, which weighs around 1,500 tons.
So again, 1,600 tons. And most academics believe that this work was done by the Romans, but that is highly unlikely.
Why were these stones abandoned? Were they too heavy even for the original builders? Or did something stop the construction before they could be moved? The local legends around these stones are fascinating. One story tells of a pregnant woman who convinced the people to feed her by claiming she knew the secret to moving these massive blocks, hence the name. Another speaks of supernatural beings, pregnant jinn, who were supposedly responsible for cutting and transporting them. Some locals even believe touching the stone of the pregnant woman can increase fertility. These folktales might sound far-fetched, but they reveal something important. These monuments have puzzled people for generations, each generation passing down stories that try to explain the seemingly impossible. Modern engineering perspective. Let's bring in some modern engineering perspective to really understand the scale of this challenge. One comprehensive study suggested you'd need over 500 people working with sophisticated machines just to move a 557-ton block across flat ground. But moving it uphill? Lifting it 23 feet into the air? Engineers today estimate you'd need 40,000 workers. That's more people than the population of most small cities. All working in perfect coordination, with primitive tools, across rocky, uneven terrain. And here's the question that haunts every researcher who studies this site. Why? Why would ancient builders choose to work with stones so impossibly large when smaller ones would have been just as effective structurally? What drove them to attempt something that pushes the boundaries of what seems physically possible, even by today's standards? Was it a display of power? A religious imperative? Or did they possess knowledge about construction techniques that we've completely lost? Think about this. In Roman architecture, you always put the most impressive elements right at the entrance. It's basic psychology. You want people to be awed the moment they arrive. But at Baalbek, these massive stones are in the back, completely opposite the entrance. That's not how Romans built. That's not how anyone built. Unless these stones were already there, already ancient, already mysterious even to the Romans themselves. The wild theories. All right, let's address the elephant in the room. Baalbek has spawned some absolutely wild theories over the centuries. And honestly, when you're staring at stones this massive, perfectly fitted with supposedly primitive technology, your brain starts reaching for explanations that feel as extraordinary as what you're seeing. The supernatural theories go way back. Local legends claimed that Cain, yes, that Cain from the Bible, built the temple while wandering the earth under God's curse. Other stories said Nimrod ordered giants to construct it as part of the Tower of Babel project. Some whispered about the Nephilim, those mysterious giants mentioned in ancient texts, being the real architects. But in our modern age, the most popular theory has gone full sci-fi. The ancient alien hypothesis suggests that only beings with technology far beyond anything humans possessed could have moved and positioned these massive stones. Writers like Graham Hancock and Zecharia Sitchin have kept these ideas alive, proposing everything from lost advanced civilizations to the Anunnaki, otherworldly beings from Mesopotamian mythology.
Mesopotamia is an exceedingly fertile plain situated between the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. For 5 millennia, this small strip of land situated in what is today Iraq, Kuwait, and Syria fostered innovations that would change the world forever.
As the true builders of Baalbek. So if these stones are so impossible to move, how do skeptics explain Baalbek? Archaeologists point out that what seems impossible might just be really, really difficult. The Romans were absolute masters of engineering. They had sophisticated cranes, pulley systems, capstans, and massive wooden wheels. We have examples of Roman engineering feats all across the ancient world that prove they could move enormous weights. When you examine the Baalbek stones up close, you can actually see chisel marks carved into them, clear evidence of human craftsmanship. Experimental archaeologists have attempted to replicate ancient construction techniques and shown that while it would require incredible organization and massive amounts of labor, it's not beyond human capability. But here's where the skeptical explanation starts to break down. These explanations don't fully account for the sheer size of the heaviest stones, which seem to exceed the known limits of Roman machinery. So why do these extraordinary theories persist? Maybe it's because ordinary explanations don't fire up our imagination the way extraordinary ones do. Philosopher Daniel Dennett once suggested that when people lack imagination about what's actually possible, they lean toward supernatural explanations. But what if there's a middle ground? What if the answer isn't aliens or magic, but human ingenuity so advanced that we've simply forgotten how it worked? The scientific breakthrough. While everyone's been debating aliens and giants, there's been over a century of serious scientific investigation quietly uncovering the real secrets of Baalbek. And what researchers have found is absolutely fascinating. The modern scientific story begins in 1898, when Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany visited the site. His visit sparked the first major archaeological excavations that ran until 1904. What started as imperial curiosity turned into groundbreaking research that began rewriting Baalbek's entire history. And here's where things get really interesting. The most shocking revelation came when they cleaned the Temple of Jupiter and found evidence that human settlement at Baalbek goes all the way back to the Neolithic period. We're talking about people living on this site potentially 10,000 years ago. Let me repeat that. 10,000 years ago. Long before the Romans. Long before the Phoenicians, even before the pyramids of Egypt were conceived. If people lived at Baalbek 10,000 years ago, it suggests the site's importance goes way deeper than Roman colonization. It means those massive foundation stones, the trilithon and other megaliths, might have been in place before the Romans ever arrived. Hence the complete silence in Roman records. You can't document how you built something if you didn't build it in the first place. But the discoveries didn't stop there. In 2004, Lebanese University teamed up with the German Archaeological Institute for a major collaborative project focused on documenting those mysterious ancient quarries. What they found was mind-blowing. They discovered Persian pottery fragments marked with cuneiform writing dating back to the 6th and 4th centuries BCE. So were the Persians behind these giant structures? The Persian pottery fills a crucial gap, but we already know from the Neolithic discovery that settlement goes back 10,000 years. The pottery tells us the site was continuously occupied until the Romans took over. But here's the million-dollar question. Were the Persians the original builders of these megalithic stones? The Persians definitely had organizational capacity and engineering knowledge. They built remarkable structures like those at Persepolis. Theoretically, they could handle megalithic constructions. But here's the problem. The structures built by the Persians, even at Persepolis, are still nothing compared to the monoliths at Baalbek. The Persepolis structures are made up of blocks that weigh between 1 and 20 tons. The blocks at Baalbek weigh over 100 times more. The approaches are completely different too. Persian builders worked by breaking large boulders into smaller, manageable forms. The Baalbek builders favored impossibly large blocks. And just like the Romans, the Persians left no records crediting themselves with building the Baalbek stones. Complete silence. Now that could be explained by poor record keeping. The Persians weren't as detailed or keen on preserving history as the Romans. But there's another issue. The Persians never demonstrated the ability to move stones remotely close to Baalbek's scale anywhere else in their vast empire. If they were capable of this feat, surely we should have seen them demonstrate the same skill in other places. The pottery proves they were there. But the engineering challenge seems to exceed their demonstrated capabilities. The stone blueprints. Now let's discuss something most people never hear about. The actual blueprints carved right into the site itself. These aren't drawings on papyrus that crumbled away centuries ago. We're talking about architectural plans literally etched into the stone floors. The German excavations between 1900 and 1904 were the first to document these incredible finds. The most striking discovery was a detailed blueprint carved directly onto the floor of the great courtyard. This wasn't some rough sketch. It was a precise floor plan of part of the hexagonal courtyard, drawn to an impressive scale of about 1/12.6. Think about what this means. These weren't just skilled laborers throwing stones together. These were master planners who carefully calculated every angle, every measurement, every design element before they placed a single block. Were these carvings practical guides for construction workers? Or were they something more, like symbols of engineering pride showing off the incredible skill of the architects?
Some of the largest moved stones on the planet. Also, you can see the back of some of these blocks here. They're very reminiscent of what we see in the Valley Temple and the Sphinx Temple.
But the most shocking connection emerged when researchers took a closer look at Podium 1, the foundation supporting the 6 massive columns that still dominate the skyline today. When they analyzed the construction techniques, they found something absolutely startling. The style and methods used in Podium 1 were virtually identical to Herodian architecture found in Jerusalem. These were precise matches. Not similar. Identical. Both sites used the exact same pattern of alternating headers and stretchers. Both featured identical drafted margin stonework. Even the average course height was exactly the same, 3.6 feet. That's way too specific to be a coincidence. This suggests there might have been direct involvement of Herodian builders at Baalbek, or at least shared construction traditions connecting these sites across the ancient world. But here's what makes this discovery so puzzling. The Herodian construction techniques date to around the 1st century BCE, yet we know people were at Baalbek 10,000 years earlier. So were the Herodian builders just the latest in a long line of civilizations that built upon an already ancient foundation? The 11,000-year mystery Baalbek isn't just an ancient site. It's a place that has been continuously occupied for 11,000 years. Let that sink in. 11,000 years of human history, all centered on this one sacred hilltop. Archaeological evidence shows people were living here as early as 9,000 BCE. Excavations have turned up pottery from the Chalcolithic period, Bronze Age artifacts, and architectural fragments that tell the story of civilization after civilization building on the same sacred ground. The first settlers chose the highest point of the hill for their community. Even the Romans did the exact same thing thousands of years later, placing their altar on the summit. They all knew how special this spot was. Even the name is fascinating. Scholars believe Baalbek comes from Baal-Nebek, which means Lord of the Source. This refers to a natural spring near the site that likely made this hilltop a sacred place of life and abundance for ancient peoples. Around 3200 BCE, The Phoenicians took over and turned Baalbek into something truly spectacular. They built a massive temple complex dedicated to their gods, Ardi and Baal, the sky god, who probably gave the city its name. You can still find traces of this Phoenician temple buried beneath the later Roman temple of Jupiter. Under Phoenician rule, Baalbek became a pilgrimage destination. People traveled from across the ancient world to worship Baal-Hadad, the fertility god, and Atargatis, the goddess of love and motherhood. But here's where things get really interesting. Many researchers suspect that those massive stones, the trilithon and the other massive blocks forming the Western Wall, might actually date back to this Phoenician period, not the Roman era. That means we could be looking at 5,000-year-old engineering that involved moving and precisely placing stones weighing hundreds of tons with nothing but human power, basic tools, and techniques we can barely comprehend today. When Alexander the Great conquered this region in 334 BCE, he gave Baalbek a makeover, including renaming it Heliopolis, the city of the sun. But the real transformation began when the Romans took over. First came Pompey the Great in 64 BCE. Then Julius Caesar made it an official Roman colony in 47 BCE. But it was Emperor Augustus around 16 BCE who really went all out, launching the most ambitious construction project the ancient world had ever seen. Interestingly, the Romans didn't just bulldoze everything and start fresh. Instead, they merged their god Jupiter with the local deity Baal, creating this powerful hybrid god called Jupiter Baal. It was like ancient cultural diplomacy through architecture. The construction timeline is staggering. Emperor Nero continued building the massive temple of Jupiter. Emperor Antoninus Pius threw in the temple of Bacchus. And finally, the Severan dynasty completed the whole complex with the temple of Venus in the 3rd century. At its absolute peak, Baalbek had towering columns stretching toward the sky, marble surfaces gleaming in the sunlight, and thousands of pilgrims flooding the courtyards. Anyone standing there would have felt like they were literally at the center of the divine universe. The Christian and Islamic eras. Then Christianity changed everything. When Emperor Constantine converted in the early 300s CE, construction stopped. Emperor Theodosius went even further. He destroyed pagan statues, tore down altars, and converted the sacred spaces into Christian churches. The Temple of Venus became a chapel. The hexagonal courtyard was turned into a church. Emperor Justinian ordered 8 massive columns from the Temple of Jupiter to be shipped all the way to Constantinople to decorate the Hagia Sophia.
The best look at ancient Constantinople is a church-turned-mosque that's been considered among the greatest houses of worship in both the Christian and Muslim worlds.
These stones were so magnificent that an emperor wanted them for one of the greatest churches ever built. By 637 CE, Muslim armies conquered Baalbek, and the site transformed again. This time, the temples became a fortress, also known as a qala. It's why locals still call it Qalat Baalbek today. Over the centuries, dynasty after dynasty left their mark: the Umayyads, Abbasids, Fatimids, and Ayyubids. Each one reshaping walls, adding towers, and building new structures on top of ancient foundations. What we have today is essentially a historical layer cake. Every civilization that touched this place left something behind. But here's the thing that keeps haunting researchers. Who were the very first people to lift those impossibly massive foundation stones into place? Who made the original decision that this hill would become a stage for gods, emperors, and conquerors for thousands of years? The engineering puzzle. So the big question everyone wants answered is pretty straightforward. How did ancient people move stones weighing over 1,000 tons? The theories that researchers have come up with are absolutely mind-bending, some as puzzling as the mystery itself. Let's start with the most obvious theory: wooden rollers and ramps. At first glance, it sounds pretty logical. You place these monster stones on cylindrical wooden logs, which reduces friction, and then you just push or pull them across the ground. Simple physics, right? Wrong. When archaeologists actually tried to test this theory in real life, it was a complete disaster. Richard Atkinson, a respected archaeologist, attempted to move just a replica Stonehenge bluestone, a tiny stone compared to Baalbek's giants. The moment they started pulling it uphill, the whole thing began sliding sideways uncontrollably. In another experiment, researchers were transporting a replica statue when it suddenly lost balance, tumbled right off the rollers, and smashed into pieces. Now picture trying this with stones that are literally hundreds of times heavier across nearly a mile of rocky, uneven terrain. So researchers pivoted to what seemed like a more promising explanation: Roman engineering genius. And let's be honest, the Romans were absolutely incredible builders. They created crane systems that were centuries ahead of their time. Their basic model, the trispastos, used a simple setup: a winch, rope, and 3 pulleys. Then they upgraded to the pentaspastos with 5 pulleys. But their heavy-duty machine was the polyspastos with 15 pulleys, 4 masts, and just 4 people operating it could lift 2.2 tons. When they added tread wheels to the mix, they could handle up to 4.4 tons. For really massive jobs, Romans built enormous wooden lifting towers powered by teams of people and animals working a capstan together. For way too long, modern scholars seriously underestimated ancient workers, dismissing them as basically unskilled laborers. But that's wrong. These people were brilliant engineers and problem solvers. We have ancient Egyptian paintings showing 172 men working together to haul a colossal statue with just pure human ingenuity and coordination. When you see that kind of teamwork and strategic thinking, you realize these weren't primitive people fumbling around with rocks. But even when you give ancient workers full credit, Baalbek is still in a league of its own. Moving an 800 to 1,000 ton block isn't just a bigger version of dragging a statue. We're talking about a completely different category of challenge. Margaret van Es from the German Archaeological Institute actually suggested that human-driven capstans could explain how the Baalbek stones were moved. On paper, it sounds like a solid theory, but here's where the math completely falls apart. Even the most advanced Roman cranes couldn't carry more than 6 tons. 6 tons. We're talking about stones at Baalbek that weigh 800 to 1,000 tons. The Baalbek stones were more than 100 times heavier than what their best equipment could handle. The alternative theories. So we're left with this incredible puzzle. If wooden rollers were completely impractical, and even the most sophisticated Roman machinery was laughably inadequate, then how did they do it? After centuries of research, countless experiments, and heated academic debates, we're still left scratching our heads. No single theory fully explains how this was accomplished. The stones were simply too massive for any lifting technology we know the Romans possessed, and dragging them across that rocky terrain seems virtually impossible. This has led to some interesting alternative theories. Some researchers insist there must have been lost engineering techniques, sophisticated methods that were perfected by ancient builders, but never written down or passed on to future generations. Think about it. What if ancient civilizations developed specialized knowledge about leverage, counterweights, or stone manipulation that was considered sacred or secret? Knowledge passed only from master to apprentice, eventually dying out completely? Others have suggested that maybe the stones were never transported at all. What if they were quarried and partially shaped right at the construction site? It's an intriguing possibility, but even that doesn't fully explain the precision and scale of what we see. German researcher Margaret van Es made another crucial discovery when she studied how these massive stones were actually cut. She found that the ancient builders were incredibly smart. They cut the megaliths along natural fissures between rock layers. This technique made it much easier to remove enormous blocks without cracking or breaking them. What's really interesting is that this same method shows up in other Roman projects like the famous Pont du Gard aqueduct in France. So we know the Romans had this technique in their engineering toolkit. But knowing how to cut the stones doesn't solve the mystery of how they moved them. the revelation. So after all this investigation, after all these theories, what's the answer? Here's what we know for certain. Baalbek was continuously occupied for 11,000 years. The massive foundation stones, the ones that seem impossible to move, predate the Roman occupation by potentially thousands of years. The Romans found these stones already in place. They built their magnificent temples on top of an already ancient foundation. That's why they never documented building them. They didn't build them. The Persians were there. Their pottery proves it. But the engineering challenge exceeds anything they demonstrated elsewhere. The Phoenicians built temples here around 5,000 years ago. They had the organizational capacity, the religious motivation, and the manpower. But here's the real revelation that changes everything. We don't have a single answer because there isn't a single answer. Baalbek represents the accumulated engineering knowledge of multiple civilizations over thousands of years. The earliest inhabitants, perhaps dating back to the Neolithic period, may have begun working with large stones for reasons we can only speculate about: religious significance, astronomical observations, or simply because this hilltop spring made it a sacred place. Over centuries and millennia, each successive civilization that occupied this site added their own innovations, their own techniques, their own ambitions. The Phoenicians may have expanded the original works into a massive temple complex, utilizing techniques we've lost to history. The Romans then built upon this already ancient foundation, adding their own architectural marvels while respecting or perhaps being unable to move the massive stones that were already there. The lost knowledge. What this means is profound. Ancient civilizations possessed engineering knowledge that we've completely lost, not because they were visited by aliens, not because they had modern technology, but because they developed sophisticated techniques over thousands of years of continuous experimentation and refinement. Think about this. We live in an age where we document everything. Every discovery, every technique, every innovation is written down, photographed, videotaped, and stored in digital archives. But for 99% of human history, knowledge was passed down orally or through hands-on apprenticeship. When civilizations collapsed through war, disease, or natural disaster, entire bodies of knowledge disappeared with them. The techniques used to build Baalbek's foundation may have been closely guarded secrets, passed only from master builders to their chosen apprentices. When those lineages ended, the knowledge vanished. We see this pattern throughout history: Damascus steel, Greek fire, Roman concrete formulations, all lost technologies that we're only now beginning to rediscover through modern scientific analysis. Baalbek represents perhaps the most spectacular example of lost engineering knowledge in human history. The builders didn't need cranes that could lift 1,000 tons. They needed ingenuity, organization, time, and techniques we can only guess at today. Perhaps they used water to float the stones. Perhaps they built massive earthen ramps that were later removed. Perhaps they used lever systems so sophisticated that our modern replications seem crude by comparison. We may never know for certain. The greater truth. But here's what Baalbek really teaches us. We've dramatically underestimated our ancestors. For too long, we've looked at ancient peoples as primitive, as somehow less intelligent or capable than we are today. Baalbek proves that's absolutely wrong. These were people with the same brain capacity as us, the same ability to innovate, to problem solve, to dream big, and then figure out how to make those dreams real. They didn't have our technology, but they had something we've largely lost: time, patience, and a willingness to attempt projects that would take multiple generations to complete. Imagine starting a construction project, knowing your great-great-grandchildren would see it finished. That's a perspective we've completely lost in our modern world. Baalbek also reminds us how fragile knowledge really is. We think of progress as linear, always moving forward, always building on what came before. But history shows us that progress is actually cyclical. Civilizations rise, accumulate knowledge, then fall. and much of that knowledge disappears. The Roman Empire preserved and transmitted massive amounts of Greek knowledge to the medieval world, but they also lost technologies, like Greek fire, that were never recovered. When the Library of Alexandria burned, how many engineering treatises, how many technical manuals, how many detailed construction guides went up in flames? We'll never know what we've lost. So standing at Baalbek today, looking up at those impossible stones, what should we feel? Not frustration at the mystery, not disappointment that we don't have all the answers. We should feel awe. Awe at human capability. Awe at what our ancestors achieved. Awe at the knowledge that still lies buried, sometimes literally, waiting to be rediscovered. The mystery of Baalbek isn't solved. Not completely. Maybe it never will be. But we know this much. It was built by humans. Ingenious, determined, visionary humans who looked at a stone weighing as much as 200 elephants and said, "We can move that, we can lift that, we can build something that will last 11,000 years." And they did. In 1984, UNESCO recognized Baalbek as a World Heritage Site, putting it on the map as one of humanity's most important archaeological treasures. But Baalbek's true heritage isn't just the stones themselves, it's what they represent. Human ambition, human creativity, and human determination to achieve the impossible. Every civilization that touched this place, from the Neolithic settlers to the Phoenicians, from the Romans to the Christians to the Islamic dynasties, each one looked at what came before and added their own chapter to the story. The real mystery isn't how they moved the stones. The real mystery is why we ever doubted they could. Because if there's one thing Baalbek proves beyond any doubt, it's this. Never underestimate what humans can achieve when they put their minds to it. Whether it's moving stones that weigh more than blue whales, building temples that last millennia, or creating mysteries that captivate us thousands of years later. We are the descendants of the people who built Baalbek. Their blood runs in our veins. Their ingenuity is part of our heritage. So the next time someone tells you something is impossible, remember Baalbek. Remember that somewhere in your ancestry, someone moved a 1,500-ton stone. And if they could do that, what can you do? Thanks for watching. If this journey through ancient mystery has captivated you, smash that like button and subscribe, because we have many more incredible ancient mysteries waiting to be explored. The past isn't dead. It's just waiting for us to remember